I once heard a Christian speaker named Mark Cahill. He snapped his fingers and said, every second, 2 people die. He talked about those people dying, not knowing Christ, and the action of him snapping his fingers created such a compelling visual. I want to create the same compelling visual for you, but not as it relates to Christ. Imagine billions of people dying at the door of their offices every single morning. This office said, we love that you are different, and what makes you unique is desired here, so come on in here and be different. Just don't talk about it in the office. We all know the taboo topics that you just don't talk about at work. Say them with me: race, religion, and politics. But who are you? Not the shaman at the summit of Mount Everest asking the existential question, who are you? But the I wake up every morning and am this person, who are you? At our core, we are our race, religion, and our politics. These are the keys to what make us unique, yet we are fed this idea that it's okay to be different, we just can't talk about being different, especially not in the office. Let me tell you something. My husband, Frank, is the smartest man I know. My daughter, Jira, is as brilliant as she is beautiful, and my son, Daniel, is a genius. I am proud to be their wife and mother, but if you ask my mom, she will tell you that I was Black and Christian before Frank, Jira, and Daniel entered my life, and I am just as proud to be Black and Christian. Yet previous bosses would eagerly ask, how's the family? But have never asked, how did the latest shooting of an unarmed Black male by police officers impact you as a wife and mother to Black males? Why? Because they got the memo too. We just don't talk about that at work. But is it because we don't think about these things? Let's do a quick survey of the audience. Raise your hand if your race has ever popped into your mind while you were at work. Now, keep your hand raised or raise your hand if your faith or religious views have ever impacted a work decision. Now, keep them up if your political ideals has ever popped into your head while you were at work. 100% of you raised your hand. So the problem is not that we have been told to not talk about these things. The problem is that prohibiting these conversations ensures that we only talk about these things with safe people. People that look and think like us. People that cannot impact how we behave. A recent study showed that 75% of white Americans report the network of people with whom they discuss important topics is entirely white. 65% of Black Americans report that their core social network is comprised of only people who also identify as Black, and 46% of Hispanics say that their network of people is entirely people who also identify as Hispanic. Here's another gotcha. 56% of Americans surveyed said that they felt Muslim values were at odds with U.S. values. But here's the kicker. 68% of those people interviewed said that they had seldom or never spoken to an actual Muslim. So you see, the conversations are happening, they just don't include diverse people. And it's not because we care about being polite. It is because we are afraid and incompetent. And no one wants to be called afraid or incompetent, so we've lied to ourselves and called our inabilities simply not polite. And here in the South, there is nothing more disgraceful to your family name than be called impolite. But the truth is, both fear and incompetence come from the same place, a lack of knowledge. And it can be said, what we don't understand, we fear. What we fear, we judge as evil. And what we judge as evil, we attempt to control, and what we cannot control, we attack. We don't see healthy dialogue. When we do have these conversations, we see elevated emotions and attacks. Because according to Paul Barnwell, Conversational competence might be the single most overlooked skill that we fail to teach students. And it's not just students that we failed. We failed top-level executives too, who don't know how to navigate and keep people safe in these tough conversations. And that's why you see this incompetence showing up in the place spending the most money on diversity, the workplace. A recent study by the Society of Human Resources Management showed that budgets allocated to diversity departments range from $30,000 to $5.1 million. Listen, these companies are not altruistic. They expect a financial return on their investment in diversity, because the studies have shown them that inclusive organizations are doing better and making more money than less inclusive companies. Heck, the U.S. technology industry alone could stand to gain an additional 470 to 570 billion, I said billion dollars, through full representation of ethnic and racial diversity. That is inclusion. But what if we could go to an entirely different level and have diverse groups dialogue about how their differences could create a financial gain for their organization? But don't get excited, because we can't talk about financial gain because we won't even discuss our differences. That is backwards. First, companies must start by teaching leaders how to navigate these conversations to a successful and productive end. Organizational psychologist George Colreiser says high-performing leaders are able to unite diverse team members by having them create common goals and even shared emotions by engaging in powerful, effective dialogue. This increases team productivity and decreases turnover. Let's pull out 3 words: powerful, effective dialogue, or deep, productive conversations. Conversations that get us past our assumptions of who the other is and allows us to judge the data and not the superficial. Let's try it on for size. Let's try an example. Here's an example. Who is more intelligent and a better member of the marketing team? The person that says, "Wow, that's a great idea. Let's test the market and see how this community will respond to this new marketing campaign." Or the person that says, "Yo, that's dope. Let's run this thing through the hood and see what them folks think." But what if both statements came from the exact same person, except in one instance, they were code switching because they knew that every single word that came from them would be judged? But what if we had deeper conversations and knew that our coworkers were intelligent and capable despite their use or non-use of modern urban vernacular? Think about the productivity loss having to screen every word from your mouth like a traveler going through TSA, and having to switch an effective way of communication simply to make others comfortable while having to validate your own intelligence. These deeper conversations allow us to get past the perception and to the productivity. So let's talk about tools. Number 1, these conversations must start small. This is like losing weight. If you've been obese for 35 years, one day of eating well might make you feel good, but it won't change a thing. But it all starts with one day. We've been thinking this way for centuries. And so we have to start these conversations small. They must be consistent, and they have to go from teams to individuals to teams to divisions to entire organizations. And number 2, leaders need effective, easy to remember tools to make this type of paradigm shift. And so I created, and I want to share with you my DARE model: describe, acknowledge, review, and engage. Describe versus interpret. A company hired me to mediate a dispute between 2 of their top leaders, Paul and Sean. Paul was adamant that Sean was not smart. I asked Paul, "Describe for me why you feel that way." Paul described Sean's poor grammar in written documents, and he added, I know she grew up in a neighborhood with some poor public schools. Sean was eager to respond to Paul's description. Sean simply asked, do you have the data and the regression analysis you need for this project? Paul said he had it and acknowledged that it was actually good. And Sean smiled. She said, you don't seem to understand that I provide that data. I'm an engineer, not a writer, and I'm the best engineer. Oh, and by the way, I did grow up in neighborhoods with some bad public schools, but my degrees are from MIT. It was not until Paul gave his description of his experience versus expressing his interpretation as fact that Sean was able to insert new data to change his perception. From there, the relationship changed, and they both went on to earn a $25,000 bonus, and neither of them gave me a dime. Acknowledge similarities without minimizing differences. While you and I likely have a whole lot in common, we are not the same. I know you mean well when you say you don't see color, but what I hear you say is I don't see you. What makes me different is what makes me proud, and when you minimize what makes me proud, you make me not matter. And we all want to matter. Review the narrative you have accepted as fact about others. Now here's going to be some news. Brace yourself. You are biased. You have not escaped the natural phenomenon where your environment impacts the way you think and behave. These biases inform our thoughts, and our thoughts inform our actions. And so if I believe that members of one community are not as smart as members of another, when it comes time for me to recruit for leadership in my company, those thoughts manifest into a behavior. And so when we review the narratives we believe about others, we may not change what we believe because that can take decades. But with review, we can change how we behave in an instant. Now here's the hardest part. The E is for engage and experience. What makes engaging and experiencing so difficult is that you have to acknowledge a fact about yourself. And that is the fact that, oh my goodness, clutch the pearls. You may be wrong. What if I engage and I am wrong and I offend? Or even worse, what if I am offended? What makes the DARE model work is the sincerity of having a conversation for the purposes of understanding and not for the purposes of conversion. I remember being in a small town, working with a large nonprofit, and as I was in this small town working with a large nonprofit, I saw this white man, and he had on a Make America Great Again shirt. Y'all, the voices in my head were screaming. Places everyone, places people. This is not a drill. DARE model time, places people. Describe versus interpret. Sir, I see you have on a Make America Great Again shirt. Can you tell me what that phrase means for you? He looked at me and he smiled as if the voices in his head started going off too. And he just simply said, you know what? I was born and raised in this town. I remember when industry was booming, everything was great. We had no drugs, we had no crime. We were great, and I want that again. Acknowledge similarities without minimizing differences. That sounds good. I bet we all would long for the day when there were no drugs, crime, and poverty. But do you really believe that everyone in this town was having the exact same experience? He looked up as if that thought had never crossed his mind, and he simply inserted, you know what, I never really thought about that, and I don't know, but what I can say is they weren't this bad off either. Review the narratives you have accepted as fact about others. That's fair. I guess when I see that phrase, I have to be honest and say, what I think the person is saying is, make America great again for them. He looked up and he seemed eager to respond to this one, and he said, I can't say you're entirely wrong, but I believe if it's great for me, it'll be great for others too. Engage and experience. That's fair. I guess great for you and great for me aren't mutually exclusive. You can want it to be great for the both of us, right? And then he made a request that astonished me. I never thought what it may have been like for someone like you. Could you please tell me what someone like you may have experienced during that time? I have to be honest and say it never crossed my mind how you would perceive this phrase. What made that conversation work is that neither of us entered or exited the conversation with the hopes of converting the other. We were simply two bold people daring to have a deeper conversation so that we can get past the perception and to the productivity. Now, later on, he came back to me and said, Dethra, you are nothing like what I thought. I smiled and popped my collar and said, not bad for the non-Republican black chick, huh? But the reality is, I go around the world teaching people, companies, leaders, how to have deeper conversations around race, religion, and politics, because I want us to stop living in each other's imagination. The most dangerous place that anyone can live is in your imagination, because in real life, they can never live up or down to what you've imagined, and your imagination will never let them be who they really are. Be bold, dare, have a deeper conversation, because every second, 2 people die. Tomorrow morning, at the entrance to your office, you don't have to be one of them. Thank you.